Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And a good morning to you, one and all. It's a beautiful Tuesday. It's May 21, I think. Yeah, it is May 21, 2024. It's a Tuesday, but not going to be a Sue's day because Susan is busy with her grandmotherly and motherly duties, helping out her daughter and her family. I'm hoping Susan will join us tomorrow. Okay, so just that is a bit of a change in the norm. Oh boy, guys. I so don't want to talk about him. You know who I'm talking about. I so don't want to. And yet, I had somebody say of a narcissistic friend of mine, she sucks the air out of the room. And that's what he has done. But not just a room, a nation and beyond. This awful, awful, awful human being. I hate to even call him a human being. It's like, it taints us all. I don't know if you are aware that there is a movie out called The Apprentice. And yes, it is about him. And it debuted at Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival, I believe the other day. And it is being called very dark. So he's not going to like it, let's put it that way. I'm waiting for him to start threatening more lawsuits, as if he needs to be in any more courtrooms or having to hire any more attorneys. But it starts with him as a young man trying to impress his father. And at first, what I've heard is that he seems somewhat sympathetic. And then he meets Roy Cohn. Who was the vile reptilian attorney that sat next to Senator McCarthy during the McCarthy hearings, aided and abetted in that horror. So Cohn is played, by the way, in it, and it makes sense. He does bear some resemblance to him. He's played by Jeremy Strong, who played the eldest troubled son in Succession, if you guys were Succession fans, and I believe is now starring on Broadway in Ibsen's Enemy of the People, for which I believe he's been nominated for a Tony Award. I keep saying I believe because I have not. These are things I've read, but I don't have any information in front of me. So Trump in this movie falls under the sway of Cohn, and he still is. I mean, Cohn was his mentor. Cohn taught him all of the principles that guide Donald Trump in his life. Boy. And when their relationship ended, Cohn got AIDS, which he refused to acknowledge. And Trump abandoned him when he had AIDS. So this movie shows his marriage with Ivana, and shows the rape of Ivana by Trump when which she attested to in their divorce proceedings. I don't know. It's incredible. Apparently, one of the funders of the film funded it because he's a Trump ally and thought this was going to be, a nice rosy picture of a wonderful man. This guy, by the way, it figures he's a friend of Trump's because he is, by any measure, also a vile human being. And that is, now I'm going to blank on his name. Is it Dan Snyder? The, I believe now former owner of the Washington, what are they called now? The Washington football team. Commanders? Anyway, so yeah, he's now apparently, having seen the movie, he's saying he might cause some trouble. Variety, the Hollywood tab, reports that the film is involved in a vicious legal battle with Dan Snyder, who donated over. He's just been a huge investor. I don't know what he did in terms of the production. And how the hell Snyder thought it was going to be a flattering portrait of the president is defies reason. They tried to stop the release of the film, but clearly they did not, if it has in fact debuted at Cannes over the weekend, I think. Maybe they're trying to scuttle its distribution in the United States, but you wonder how dumb people are, how they never learn that when you do this kind of thing, you don't want people to see this film, Snyder. Well, the one way you are going to build an audience for it is, of course, trying to keep people from seeing it. Boy. They talk about in the piece that I had seen that how Trump just laps up Cohn's life lessons, and that he lays them out and passes them on in I hate to say his book, The Art of the Deal, one of his ghost-written books. And some of them listed here are attack, attack, attack. Someone comes at you with a knife, you hit them with a bazooka. Admit nothing and deny everything. And never admit defeat. Well, I'll tell you this. This is a guy who clearly lives by his principles, does he not? Since we have now seen him, unfortunately, in action, clearly embodying all that Roy Cohn taught him. And so to his trial, which is ongoing. The prosecution, as I'm sure you know, has rested its case. The defense is now putting on their paltry case. They have next to none that I can ascertain. And the one witness that they thought would be their big witness that they brought forth, caused this really relatively cool judge, Merchant, to lose it yesterday, as I'm sure you've heard. And this parade of acolytes and sycophants and bootlickers and ass kissers and people willing to abase themselves to show their fealty to Trump continues apace. And what's amazing is it's a ludicrous, cartoonish spectacle. But it involves powerful men, mostly, and women, in positions of power. And they apparently have no problem dressing in the uniform of their leader, looking like peas in a pod. Yesterday's group got more attention than a lot of others. The cast changes. There are so many of these people who want to kneel and kiss the ring. This one, when I looked at the picture, I didn't recognize everybody, but I later learned that one of the guys I was looking at was a guy who'd spent a lot of time in jail on drug charges, and he also was the former leader of the New York chapter of the Hells Angels, a motorcycle gang. He was there, and he wasn't wearing black leather. He was wearing a blue suit, a white shirt, and a red tie. Also there, former jailbird and former New York Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik. Also Boris Epshteyn, who is under indictment, I believe, in the Arizona case regarding the efforts to dislodge the rightful winner of the last presidential election. Boris Epshteyn, who I believe also provided Trump with, I'm trying to remember what I read. He's not helpful. Trump thinks he is, but he's not. He's a crook. But there amongst them was a guy whose books I've read, a few, who I know to be bright as blazes. I mean, he's a Harvard professor, for God's sakes. What's a Harvard professor doing in this crowd? A Harvard law professor. Well, he's also the guy that was palsy-walsy with the now dead why am I blanking on his name? Epstein, the child molester. And the person I'm talking about is Alan Dershowitz. Whoa, how he has fallen. He was on OJ's defense team. He was also on Trump's defense team, and I believe it was his first impeachment trial. So there was this Harvard law professor standing next to the Hell's Angel gang leader and the former police commissioner and jailbird. And you can't, I'm going to say it again, I'm sorry, but you can't make it up. We are living some, dystopian nightmare. You can't make it up. On the other hand, Please, somebody wake me up. Tell me this is a nightmare I'm having. Oh, Kurt, thank you. I didn't see this. Kurt writes, he's already Trump, that is. Says he will sue the movie makers of the Apprentice. Oh yeah, well that's his knee jerk reaction to everything. As many times a day as you say hi, how are you? Trump says I'm going to sue you, and then does. Where are there any attorneys in the country left who would work for him? Uh, yes, it says here we will be filing a lawsuit to address the blatantly false assertions in that film. This garbage is pure fiction. Okay, well, good luck to you, because I don't think it's gonna work. No, this says here the film premiered yesterday. Okay. Um, and the director addressing the audience before the film said, there is no nice metaphorical way to deal with the rising wave of fascism. It's not going to be pretty. But I think the problem with the world is that the good people have been quiet too long. Okay, so yeah, clearly, yeah, Trump would not be liking that. Now, speaking of that, I wanted. Oh no, let me remind you of this, because I was talking about sort of the abasement that these mostly men are willing to subject themselves to show their fealty to Trump. And while I suspect that some really are on board with him, I mean, they're fascists themselves and are just loving what he's doing. Um, more, most of them, and I think we've talked about this before, are likely doing it out of fear. They're scared to death. And it was Tom Nichols, I think, in The Atlantic, who said they are, in fact, terrified of their own voters. You know, I'm terrified of their voters too, but it's fascinating that they have the same fear and they know them better than I. What are they afraid of? They're afraid of getting killed. They're afraid of being targeted. Their voters have turned into thugs and intimidators and bullies under this would-be autocrat that they worship. And so we know this. I mean, some Republicans who have shown a bit of spine, like Mitt Romney, has said, I believe he said it in his book, that he wanted to vote to impeach Trump, this Republican, but he was afraid to. And he was afraid for fear that his family might be harmed. He told that to Romney, but he, in public, only defended Trump out of fear. And I don't know if you ever read it. God, I read it so long ago. George Orwell's 1984. Should have been 2024. Got the date wrong. And in it, Nichols reminds us, there's this guy, the protagonist of the novel, whose name is Winston Smith. And Winston Smith works for the Ministry of Truth, which, of course, is the exact opposite of that. Sort of like under under a Trump administration, the Justice Department is anything but the Justice Department. The Environmental Protection Agency is anything but the Environmental Protection. It's the exact opposite. But in 1984, the novel, Winston Smith works at the Ministry of Truth, where his job is to produce lies. And his job is to rewrite history so that whatever the leadership says today cannot be contradicted by something it might have said yesterday. So you have to keep, reinventing reality. The leadership, Big Brother, has something called Order for the Day, which are announcements about all the wondrous achievements that they have accomplished. But inasmuch as they don't dovetail with what the leadership said would happen, then it is Winston's job to get rid of any, embarrassing references that were in the media to, make sure that, again, the leader is infallible. Also, people disappear. So, all of a sudden, somebody who you knew was there, was alive, they literally disappear from history, from reality, and eventually from memory. And then once Winston every day does his job and fixes the history for that day, he drops, this is in the novel, he drops any of the excised information, the stuff that we no longer want to acknowledge as truth. He drops that stuff into what's called the memory hole. The memory hole, which is just a little small opening at his desk, and that opening leads directly to a furnace where inconvenient realities are torched and disappear and go up in smoke. And Nichols points out that these Republicans who don the red ties and repeat the lies and abase themselves in front of cameras on a daily basis out of fear, out of opportunism, out of cowardice and lack of any central ethical grounding. It means that they have to constantly be throwing things down memory holes. Because if you ever watch, and I don't, but I sometimes see written later about an interview, let's say, with one of these Republicans. As a matter of fact, I think the most current one that's got some ink is Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio, of course, said some just scathing things about Donald Trump back in the day. And he now is all in. But when these guys show up at on Meet the Press or whatever, they are now, more than they used to be, confronted with their past statements. Their past statements, which often are, just viscerally disgusted about Donald Trump. Because in the past, they spoke truthfully about their reaction to this man. But now, even with that evidence, having not gone down a memory hole, not gone up in flames and smoke, they still abase themselves by, I, I mean, I, why is it, and I've said this before, but why is it that the worst of us seem to have the largest impact? Why is it the worst of us seem to end up running things, being so powerful? Maybe because they're willing to do anything, because the best of us have scruples, have morals. I don't know. But it should make anybody fearful to understand that reality, that the Republicans are afraid of their own voters. So if you're fearing them, you have it on pretty, yeah. I think, yeah, I would defer to the people who, know these folks better than I. I would defer to their conclusion that there is reason to be afraid. I want to share with you, and I've talked of her before, but if you're somebody who says, like, I don't know where the heck I'm supposed to be getting the news anymore, I just, can't trust anything, let me suggest following a Substack. I'll give the address if I can see it here. The Substack, and she puts out just wonderfully readable history lessons. The defense has rested, is over, except for then closing arguments, the judge's instructions to the jury, and the jury, this will all happen next week. Although I guess they could get into I don't know. It's not my job. The trial has happened. The arguments have been made. Anyway, the woman is a historian, and I've learned so much. She's a historian, but she looks at current events through the lens of history. And her name is Heather Cox Richardson. And you can get her stuff for free at Heather Cox Richardson at substack.com. I cannot recommend a source for news more. Heather Cox Richardson at substack.com. The thing she put out today, it goes far and wide, and I'm going to pull some things out of it that are, she quotes Trump from some of his more recent rallies, one in Minnesota on Friday. Here is what Trump said to his scary crowd. No matter how hateful and corrupt the communists and criminals we are fighting against may be. That's what you've been reduced to, by the way. You are communists and criminals. No matter how hateful and corrupt the communists and criminals we are fighting against may be, you must never forget, this is not a nation that belongs to them. This is a nation that totally belongs to you. This is your home. This is your heritage. And you know what I would say? This is flat out Hitlerian language. In the same speech, he urged gun owners to be rebellious, quoting, be rebellious. He told the crowd that if Biden were a Republican, they'd bring back the death penalty, put him in the electric chair. All these images of death and violence and calling people to violence. And then, astonishingly, Richardson and Milton, I thank you for sending it to me too. He put on Instagram a video of what a newspaper would look like after he wins in 2024. And it sort of looks like an old-fashioned newspaper. And here's the headline. What's next for America? And here's some of what's next, according to the newspaper. Industrial strength significantly increased, driven by the creation of a unified Reich. Reich. R-E-I-C-H. Excuse me. What? And Richardson says, it is not clear to me how anyone can any longer deny that Trump is promising to destroy our democracy and usher in authoritarianism. And then she goes on to say, but it's fascinating that he's not going after like Nikki Haley's voters. He can't win the way he's presenting himself. And he knows that. That's why he has turned to this emphasis on violence. His lies have become more outrageous. He is simply going to, as you know, when he loses the election, he and all these senators and Congress people that have abased themselves for him, he and they've already said they will, are going to say it was not a free and fair election and that no matter what the numbers say, they won. I mean, you can't, the thing is, and it wears us out. All they do is lie. I mean, she points out another lie, that this awful Trumpian woman from Florida, Paulina Luna, who was there supporting him at the trial the other day, she went on Fox News and said, you know, they're they're keeping cameras out of the courtroom so the American people don't see what's happening. And that's just, it's not true. So, I mean, if you listen, they don't allow cameras in any courtroom forever in New York. They've been banned since, well, not forever, since 1997. I mean, lying is part and parcel, just bald-faced lies. But the most important of the lies, the big lie, is, of course, that the presidential election 2020 was stolen. And you look, and Richardson points out the threats of violence to members of Congress, to federal judges, to election workers, to anyone they perceive to have facilitated this thievery of the election. I mean, it's just skyrocketed. Threats against federal judges have increased 150%. Members of Congress now are surrounded by security. They're living their lives. I saw Fani Willis, the prosecutor in Georgia, on Rachel Maddow last night. And good God, what a brave, brave woman. She has no freedom. She has no freedom because she is living under constant threat of death. And when you think that the basic tenet of a democracy is that the people vote, the winner wins, the loser graciously accepts the result and goes away. And now you have this party, this candidate, and his supporters in Congress and in media and all around who are already saying there's only one outcome in the election we're heading into in November that they will see as the right one. And of course, that is only if Donald Trump wins. A CBS poll this weekend showed that half of Arizona Republicans say they will not accept the results of the election if Trump loses. But then Richardson, because she's just wonderful for digging up stuff that I haven't heard of, she talks about some of these Republicans now getting weary of it. She talks about a woman who you've probably never heard of named Courtney Gore, who's just a regular woman who ran for a school board seat in Texas. And she never would have thought she'd be running for a school board seat, but she was because she watched Fox News and she listened to it. And she wanted to be on the school board so she could combat pornography being taught and critical race theory. She won. She got on the board. And then she found out there was no pornography. There was no critical race theory being taught in her district. And this woman went out and told her constituents, hey, it's not happening. Relax. I was all worked up too. It's not happening. And man, she got turned on big time. It's why people, so she's got more guts than, Marco Rubio, Ron Johnson, the list goes on forever and ever. And she says, I am over the political agenda, the hypocrisy, BS. I took part in it. I refuse to any longer. And she thinks of herself as a conservative Republican. She says, it's not serving our party. We have to do better. And then listen to what a meteorologist on some local station in Miami said. This is God help him. Steve McLaughlin. You might have heard that Ron DeSantis, the governor, signed a law last week that essentially criminalizes climate change. So signed into law last week that will remove references to climate change from any state law or regulation. So it's sort of like climate change down the memory hole. And this meteorologist slash reporter goes on TV and says this. I'm awed by this. On Thursday, we reported on NBC6 News that the government of Florida was beginning to roll back really important climate change legislation and really important climate change language, in spite of the fact that the state of Florida over the last couple of years has seen record heat, record flooding, record rain, record insurance rates, and the corals are dying all over the state. The entire world is looking to Florida to lead in climate change. And our government is saying that climate change is no longer the priority it once was. Please keep in mind the most powerful climate change solution is the one you already have in the palm of your hands: the right to vote. And we will never tell you who to vote for. But we will tell you this: we implore you to please do your research and know that there are candidates that believe in climate change, and there are solutions, and there are candidates that don't. Well, yow. Imagine any of the local meteorologists here, who I don't know what station you might want, imagine them saying that. Wow. So anyway, that's just some stuff from Heather Cox Richardson's Substack today. Heather Cox Richardson at substack.com. Of course, if you start getting it, you're going to see where I get most of my content. You'll be ahead of me. Oh, God. Beth writes, and Beth is in the film industry. With these independent films that are shown at film festivals, they're trying to pick up a studio or distributor for their product. When you see a movie trailer and see like 5 different company names, you don't know, right? But then you see Warner Brothers. That tells you that Warner Brothers is serving as the distributor of the film for a nice cut of the profits. Beth goes on to say, I've worked on a bunch of projects where you have these multi-billionaires that also own production companies or film financing companies. They know nothing about film or film business, but they want that red carpet walk. They want to be close to the starlets. She says, I worked on a film that Steve Mnuchin helped finance before he got married. Need I say more? If we have learned nothing about the Trump years, it is any PR is good PR for this vile human. To his base or swing voters, it will just look like liberal Hollywood beating up on the Donald. I'm going to say Dan Snyder just gave Donald a massive gift. Well, because why? Because wouldn't a studio? I mean, Snyder has upped the profile of the film, and as I said, doesn't that mean people will want to see it? And doesn't that mean some bean counting studio exec is going to say, "Hey, man, let's distribute this thing." Granted, there might be security issues outside the. See, maybe that's what the fear will be. That theaters will be afraid if his thugs come out. Do you see where we are? Do you see where we are? My God. Oh boy. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take a breath. Um, you know, I was reading another person I read, Alyssa Wald, and she was saying that, they say that it is never you should never speak ill of the dead. It is considered. I know people who live by this. They will never speak ill of the dead. And she goes on to say, but not me. And I would agree, not me either. Because there are people who, when they die, I raise a glass, as did she. And the death she was referring to was this President Raisi of Iran. That guy has more blood on his hands than just. He killed more Iranian people than we ever did, the bad United States, the evil empire US, or than Israel ever did, who've been in a shadow war with them forever. He strung up his people in mass hangings. He was he he was evil incarnate. You don't mourn a death like that. You don't silence yourself because you don't speak ill of the dead. There are deaths worth celebrating. And his is one, without a doubt. Oh, I also came across a quote. Oh, wait, Lynn wrote, you have to wonder if Trump is up in the polls because the people being interviewed are folks who still use landlines. No, the polling companies have gotten beyond that. They don't only call people with landlines anymore. And also, she's thinking people over six. No, look, here's what I think about polls. They're bull. They're almost all bull. A lot of the polls the night of this election that Trump won in 2016, lost the popular vote, but won the Electoral College and got himself into the White House, all the polls showed Hillary Clinton winning. I don't think, was there a poll anywhere? And that was on the eve of the election. Polls now, more than 6 months before the election, well, about 6 months before the election, right? They are, I don't know why we still even pay attention to these things. I can see why a any candidate and campaign would want, information as to how people are feeling or this and that. But my God, I also know that there are people who play the polls. They give wrong answers. They don't tell the truth. It's not like it goes down under their name. I don't know. What Democrats have to acknowledge is that Biden is unpopular. Now, I find that incredible because he's been one of the most effective presidents in recent history. Hasn't even served out 4 years, got more done than most. And I'll blame media for that. I'll blame Biden for not being one who, necessarily trumpets as he works more quietly. He's a grown-up. He is what used to be the kind of person anyone would want in the presidency. He takes his job seriously. Doesn't look at it as, a great opportunity for, scamming people and getting even richer. No. And in fact, where do I have it? Robert Reich put together this just endless thing about, he says, first of all, let us recall that there was once before in American history a time when the American voter voting for the president was voting with two candidates who had held the job as we are. This has not happened in my lifetime. And that was when Theodore Roosevelt ran against William Howard Taft in 1912. And the voters had, a sense of Roosevelt in office and Taft in office. But it's hard to get facts in this information age because it's a disinformation age. But here's just a few facts that Reich puts out. How the hell people see Trump as better able to handle the economy when under Trump the unemployment rate rose to 6.3%. Under Biden, it has remained under 4% for the longest stretch in 50 years. Women are being employed at a record rate. Wages are rising for American workers. Okay? The stock market has soared under Biden. It broke the 40,000 barrier for the first time in history. Under Trump, get this, the national debt rose from 20 trillion to 28 trillion. That is an increase of about 39%, and more than any other such increase in any 4-year presidential term. And yet and those are quantifiable facts, numbers. And the American people are, I don't know, deaf, dumb, blind, and stubborn about it. And you know why our debt just skyrocketed under Trump? Because of the tax cuts he gave to the rich. Under Biden, the national debt has grown, grows under every president at a much slower pace. Under Trump, the number of Americans lacking health insurance rose by 3 million. People lost health insurance when Trump was president. Under Biden, Obamacare has surged from 12 million to almost twice that, 21.3 million. Under Trump, 3 million lost their health insurance. And believe it or not, the actual prices of goods and services is lower today than it was under Trump. And that's according to the Congressional Budget Office, which it just crunches numbers. Biden's investments in infrastructure, semiconductors, green technologies are creating jobs. Biden is making the biggest investment in infrastructure in 60 years. Trump, you'll recall, was always saying it's going to be infrastructure week, infrastructure week. He didn't do a damn thing. Spending on new factories has tripled over the last 3 years with Biden in the White House. Construction employment has hit an all-time high. The CHIPS Act is creating large numbers of manufacturing jobs. My God, where's media? A lot of this is on them because they can never report anything that Biden does without somehow undercutting it. And they're, again, as they were in every presidential year, they can't stop watching Trump. Oh, guys, my blood pressure's going up. Yeah. Oh, I had said, I came upon this quote from Salman Rushdie. I mean, this is a guy who's a Muslim, and he knows about radical Muslim politics and means and methods. I'm looking at a picture of him now. Is a huge scar down his right cheek. His one eye is gone because of the knife attack on him by somebody trying to carry out this old fatwa that the mullahs in Iran had put on him. And he told a German magazine the other day, he is just flummoxed by the European and American left and how they're lathered up about Gaza. Here's Rushdie. If there were a Palestinian state now, it would be run by Hamas. And that would make it a Taliban-like state. And it would be a client state of Iran. Is that what the progressives on the left want to create? A Taliban-like client state for the Palestinians to live in? Well, I don't think they've thought about it that much. They're too lathered up in their ignorant self-righteousness. God almighty. Okay, that's it for me. I think Susan's going to be joining us tomorrow. I'll try to lighten things up. I usually try when she's on, but somehow we still end up getting all sour and raging. We'll see. One never knows, does one? I hope you enjoy this beautiful day.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.